He thought he knew everything about the woman who cleaned his home, until one night, he followed her, a billionaire, a quiet maid, two completely different worlds, connected by something no one noticed. But when Ethan Cole stepped out of his car and followed Lena into the darkness beneath a broken bridge, what he saw shattered everything he believed about wealth, kindness, and the people we choose not to see. Because sometimes, the most shocking truth isn't hidden. It's ignored. Ethan Cole had built his life on patterns, predictable markets, predictable outcomes, predictable people. From the glass walls of his Beverly Hills home office, the world below always moved in clean lines, cars gliding through sunlit streets, palm trees swaying in a rhythm that never surprised him. And even the people inside his home followed a quiet routine he never questioned. Especially Lena Brooks. For 2 years, she had arrived at exactly 6:58 every morning. Not 6:57, not 7 o'clock. Always 6:58. She moved through the house with a calm efficiency that bordered on invisible. Breakfast was always ready before the twins came downstairs. The floors were always spotless. The laundry folded with edges so sharp it looked like it had never been worn. She spoke when spoken to, smiled softly when thanked, and disappeared every day at exactly noon. Ethan had never asked where she went. He told himself that was respect. The truth was simpler. He had never thought about it. But 3 weeks ago, something shifted. It was small at first. So small it didn't belong in a man like Ethan's world. A man who negotiated billion-dollar deals before lunch. Lena's hands. He noticed them one morning as she placed a plate of sliced apples in front of his daughter, Emily. The skin across her knuckles was cracked, red, almost raw. Her fingers moved carefully, as if even the air hurt. Ethan had paused in the doorway longer than usual. He had almost said something. But then his phone buzzed. A deal in Singapore. Urgent. And the moment passed. After that, it was her eyes. Dark circles weren't new. Lena worked hard. He knew that much. But this was different. The shadows under her eyes had deepened into something heavier, something that didn't belong to sleep deprivation. It looked like exhaustion that didn't end. Then came the weight loss. Her uniform hung looser each week, not enough for anyone to comment, not enough to raise concern, just enough to notice. If you were looking. Ethan told himself he was imagining things. People changed. Life was stressful. It wasn't his place to ask. He paid her well. That was what mattered. Or at least, that was what he believed. The moment that broke the pattern came on a Thursday. He had just finished a call when he heard something from the kitchen. A sound that didn't belong in his carefully ordered world. A dull, hollow thud. Not loud, not dramatic, but wrong. Ethan stepped into the kitchen and saw Lena on the floor. The bottle of warm milk she had been preparing lay on its side, a white puddle spreading slowly across the tile. Lena's body was still. One arm bent awkwardly beneath her face pale, too pale. For a second, Ethan didn't move, yet then everything rushed in at once. He dropped his phone, knelt beside her, pressed his fingers against her neck. Her pulse was there, but weak, uneven. "Lena," he said, his voice sharper than he expected. "Can you hear me?" No response. He called Dr. Patterson immediately. 20 minutes later, the doctor stood in the hallway, his expression tight. "She's severely malnourished," he said quietly. Ethan blinked. "That doesn't make sense." Dr. Patterson didn't argue. He simply held Ethan's gaze. "Is she sleeping outside?" the doctor asked. The question landed heavier than it should have. "That's impossible," Ethan replied, almost too quickly. "I pay her a full salary." The doctor nodded once, slowly. I'm just telling you what her body is showing. When the doctor left, the house felt different. Too quiet. Too still. Ethan stood in the hallway, staring at Lena as she lay resting on the couch, wrapped in a blanket. Her face looked smaller somehow. Fragile. Like something that had been slowly disappearing. That night, Ethan didn't sleep. He sat in his office long after the lights of the city dimmed, staring at nothing, the doctor's question repeating in his head. Is she sleeping outside? It didn't make sense. It couldn't. He signed the payroll himself. Every 2 weeks. The same number, the same amount. $1,500. Enough for rent, food, transportation. Enough for a life. He knew that. He had calculated it himself. But then another thought crept in. One he didn't like. He didn't hand her the money. Vanessa did. His wife handled the household, the staff, the details he never needed to think about. Ethan had trusted that. Why wouldn't he? And still, the thought stayed. Quiet. Persistent. The next morning, Lena returned to work, as if nothing had happened. She moved slower, more carefully. But she was there. Back in her uniform. Back in her place. Invisible again. At exactly noon, she changed out of her uniform in the service room. Ethan watched from the second-floor office window. He hadn't planned to. But when he saw her step outside, something inside him refused to let it go. She wore the same gray blouse, the same loose black sweatpants, and that coat. Always that coat, even in warm weather, even when it made no sense. She wrapped it tightly around herself, as if it mattered more than comfort, as if it was protecting something. Ethan watched her walk down the driveway, past the gate, onto the street. He waited. 10 seconds, 20, 30. Well, then he stood up, grabbed his keys, and walked out. He told himself it was nothing, just curiosity, just a quick check. But as he followed her SUV at a distance, 3 cars behind, he felt something else creeping in. Something unfamiliar. Guilt. Lena walked 4 blocks before reaching the main road. She didn't call a ride. She didn't get picked up. She waited at a bus stop. Ethan slowed his car, watching from across the street as she boarded a city bus, one he had probably never noticed in his life. For a moment, he hesitated. This was ridiculous. He was a 40-year-old man, a CEO, following his housekeeper like some kind of amateur detective. But then the doors of the bus closed, and something in his chest tightened. Ethan pulled forward. He followed. The bus moved east, leaving behind the polished streets of Beverly Hills. The buildings changed. The sidewalks cracked. The air felt heavier, even through the glass of his car. Miles passed. Then more. Until the city he knew no longer looked like his city. Lena got off near an intersection Ethan had never driven through. He parked 2 blocks back and followed on foot. The ground beneath his shoes changed, from smooth pavement to uneven concrete, then to dirt. The smell hit him next. Something sour, damp, forgotten. Lena didn't look back. She walked with purpose, like someone who had made this journey too many times to count. 10 minutes. 15. 20. Until the street ended. Ahead, a concrete overpass stretched across a narrow channel of dark water. Lena paused, looked both ways, then stepped off the sidewalk and began climbing down the dirt embankment. Ethan stopped. His heart was beating faster now. He moved closer, keeping behind a concrete pillar. And then, he saw it. Cardboard. Flattened boxes forming a makeshift floor beneath the bridge. A plastic sheet stretched over one corner. And 2 children. A girl, maybe 7 or 8, sitting on an overturned bucket, carefully organizing something in a plastic bag. And a baby, sleeping inside a cardboard box, wrapped in a coat. Ethan's breath caught. He knew that coat. He had seen it every day. On Lena's shoulders as she cleaned his home. On Lena's back as she walked through his kitchen. That coat, now covering a baby. Under a bridge. Ethan felt his knees weaken. The world tilted. And in that moment, every quiet morning, and every unnoticed detail, every time he chose not to ask, collapsed into something he could no longer ignore. He took one step forward, and everything changed. The air beneath the overpass felt heavier, thicker, like it held on to things the rest of the city tried to forget. Ethan's polished shoes sank slightly into the damp dirt as he moved closer, each step slower than the last, as if his body already knew what his mind was still trying to catch up to. The girl saw him first. Her head snapped up, eyes sharp and steady, locking onto him in a way that made Ethan stop without thinking. There was no confusion in her expression, no curiosity, only awareness. And something else. Protection. She stood up immediately, placing herself between Ethan and the cardboard box where the baby slept. Her small frame straightened, her shoulders squared in a way that didn't belong to a child. It belonged to someone who had learned, far too early, that the world could take things away without warning. Behind her, Lena froze. She had just crouched down, one hand brushing gently over the baby's cheek, when she noticed the shift in the girl's posture. She followed her daughter's gaze, and when she saw Ethan standing there, all the color drained from her face. "Sir," the word broke as it left her lips, not because she didn't know what to say, but because she knew exactly what this meant. Her hand trembled as she slowly stood up, lifting the baby into her arms. The child stirred softly, but didn't wake, his small body instinctively curling closer to her warmth. "Sir, please," she said again, her voice thinner now, stretched tight with fear. I can explain." Ethan didn't respond. He couldn't. His eyes were moving, taking everything in piece by piece. The cardboard flattened into a makeshift floor, the thin plastic sheet tied to rusted beams above, catching drips of water before they hit the ground. A bucket half filled with cloudy water, a grocery bag hanging from a nail hammered into concrete, and that coat. His gaze returned to it, now wrapped around the baby in Lena's arms. It wasn't just familiar anymore. It was undeniable. "This," Ethan finally said, his voice quieter than he expected. "This is where you live?" The question sounded wrong the moment it left him. Too simple. Too late. Lena swallowed hard. Her eyes dropped for a second. Not in shame, but in calculation. Like she was choosing which truth she could afford to say. "Just for now," she whispered. "It's temporary." But even she didn't believe it. The girl stepped forward before Ethan could say anything else. "If you're going to yell at her," she said, her voice clear, steady, "you can yell at me instead." Ethan blinked. The words didn't match the voice, or the size of the person saying them. The girl's chin lifted slightly, her dark eyes never leaving his face. "My mom works all day for you," she continued. "She doesn't do anything wrong." "Maya," Lena tried, her voice breaking, but the girl shook her head just once. "No, Mama." There was no defiance in it, just certainty. "She wakes up when it's still dark," Maya went on. "She leaves before we wake up, and when she comes back, she's tired, but she still—" Her voice caught. Just for a second. But she pushed through it. "Oh, she still makes sure we eat first." Ethan felt something tighten in his chest. Unfamiliar. Uncomfortable. "She doesn't eat," Maya added quietly. "Not really." Lena closed her eyes. "Maya, please." But the girl kept going. "She gives us her food. Every day. From your house. Ethan's stomach dropped. The image hit him instantly. The plate he had seen so many times on the kitchen counter. Prepared neatly, balanced, healthy, untouched. He had assumed she ate later. He had never checked. He had never thought to. Maya pointed toward the plastic bag resting near the cardboard floor. She brings it here, she said. She saves it. Ethan looked at the bag, then back at Lena. Her grip on the baby tightened slightly, like she was bracing herself for something. I didn't want you to know, she said softly. I didn't want you to think that I couldn't do my job. Her voice wavered. That I wasn't capable. Ethan stared at her, at the woman who had spent 2 years inside his home, making sure his children were fed, safe, comfortable, while her own children slept under a bridge. You think I would fire you for this? He asked. Lena didn't answer right away. She didn't have to. The silence said enough. Maya stepped closer to her mother, her hand reaching out to grip the edge of Lena's coat, the same coat wrapped around the baby. You don't understand, the girl said, her voice softer now, but no less steady. People always say they won't, until they do. Ethan felt that one, deeper than he expected. A breeze moved through the underpass, carrying with it the distant sound of traffic above them. Cars passing, lives continuing. But up there, everything was normal. Down here, nothing was. Ethan looked around again. This wasn't chaos. It was organized, carefully. The cardboard was layered, not scattered. The few belongings they had were placed with intention. There was a small stack of books tucked into a corner, wrapped in plastic to keep them dry. A pair of children's shoes, cleaned and lined up neatly. Even here. There was dignity, and that made it worse, because it meant this wasn't neglect. It was survival, carefully maintained, repeated, every day. How long? Ethan asked quietly. Lena hesitated. Then, 3 months. The number hung in the air. 3 months. Ethan's mind tried to place it. 3 months ago, what had changed? Before he could ask, Maya spoke again. We had an apartment, she said, a small one. Oh, but it was ours. Her eyes flickered for just a second, then steadied. But we couldn't stay. Why not? Ethan asked. Maya looked at her mother. Lena shook her head slightly, but the girl had already decided. Because the rent didn't get paid, she said. Lena inhaled sharply. Maya, it's not her fault, the girl added quickly, her voice rising just enough to break. She tried. She always tries. Ethan felt the ground shift beneath him again. Something wasn't lining up. You weren't getting paid? He asked, turning back to Lena. She opened her mouth, then closed it. Fear moved across her face like a shadow. Not fear of him. Fear of something else. Something bigger. I get paid, she said finally. But it didn't sound right. It sounded careful, measured, like she was stepping around something sharp. But Ethan narrowed his eyes slightly. How much? Lena hesitated again. Her fingers tightened around the baby's blanket. 600, she said quietly. The number hit him like a physical force. 600 every 2 weeks? She nodded. Ethan's jaw clenched. That wasn't right. It couldn't be. He signed off on 1,500 every single time. The numbers didn't match. At all. A cold, unfamiliar feeling began to spread through his chest. Slow. Heavy. What changed? He asked, his voice lower now. Maya answered before Lena could stop her. They told her that's what she gets now, the girl said. And if she didn't like it, she could leave. Ethan felt something inside him shift. Not confusion anymore. Not disbelief. Something sharper. More focused. "Who told her that?" he asked. Maya's eyes didn't waver. The lady of the house." The world went very still. For a second, Ethan didn't hear the traffic. Didn't feel the wind. Didn't even feel the ground beneath his feet. Just one name forming in his mind. Vanessa. Behind him, a car passed overhead, the sound echoing through the concrete like distant thunder. Ethan exhaled slowly. Long. Controlled. But nothing about what he felt was controlled anymore. He looked at Lena again. Really looked this time. At the exhaustion in her eyes. The weight she carried in her posture. The quiet strength that had kept her moving forward without asking for anything. And for the first time, he understood. Not everything, but enough to know this wasn't just a mistake. This was something else. Something deliberate. Something wrong. Ethan took another step forward, closer now, but not as a man standing above them, but as someone stepping into something he should have seen a long time ago. "Lena," he said, his voice steady but different now. "We're going to fix this." She looked at him, confusion flickering through the fear. Fix it? The word didn't belong here. Not under a bridge. Not after 3 months of surviving like this. Maya didn't relax. Not yet. Her eyes stayed on him, watching, measuring, waiting. Because promises were easy, but proof, that was something else entirely. And she had learned that lesson young. Too young. Ethan glanced once more at the cardboard, the coat, the life built out of almost nothing, then back at them. And in that moment, he knew this wasn't just about helping. Well, it was about finding out how something like this had been allowed to happen right inside his own world, and who had made sure it did. Because whatever the truth was, it was closer than he wanted it to be, and he wasn't sure he was ready for it. The silence under the bridge stretched, thick and unmoving, like the air itself was waiting for something to break. Ethan stood there, his hands at his sides, but his mind racing, trying to reorder everything he thought he knew about his life, his home, the people in it, and none of it fit anymore. Maya didn't step back. She stayed exactly where she was, planted between him and her family, her small body acting like a wall that refused to move. "You say you're going to fix it," she said, her voice calm but edged with something older than her years. But people say things all the time." Ethan looked at her, not as a child now, but as someone who had already learned how fragile words could be. "What do you want me to do?" he asked quietly. Maya didn't hesitate. "Tell the truth," she said. The answer landed harder than he expected. Simple. Direct. Unavoidable. Behind her, Lena shifted slightly, adjusting the baby in her arms. Her eyes moved between Ethan and her daughter, torn between fear and something else. Something fragile, almost like hope, but not quite ready to exist. "Maya," Lena whispered, "that's enough." But it wasn't. Not for Maya, not tonight. "No, Mama," she said again, softer this time, but just as firm. "It's not enough." Her voice trembled now, not from fear, but from the weight of everything she had been holding in. You always tell me to be quiet," she said, "to not cause trouble, to just get through it." Lena's eyes filled, but she didn't interrupt, because she knew. There was no stopping this. "But I hear things," Maya continued. "I hear you at night." Ethan felt something shift again inside his chest. Maya's gaze didn't leave him. "You think we don't notice," she said. "But we do." Her voice softened just slightly. "I hear you when you think we're asleep, when you're coughing because you haven't eaten, when you're moving around because you're cold." Lena's shoulders tightened. Tears slipped down her cheeks now, silent and steady. "I hear you when you cry," Maya added. The words hung in the air, heavy, unavoidable. "And you think we don't know why," she said. Ethan swallowed, hard, because suddenly, this wasn't just about money. It wasn't just about a mistake or a missing paycheck. This was about something deeper, something that had been breaking, quietly, for a long time. "She tells us everything is okay," Maya said, her voice almost breaking now. "But it's not." Her eyes flicked down for just a second, toward the cardboard, the plastic sheet, the small space they called home. "Nothing about this is okay." Ethan exhaled slowly, the weight of her words settling over him like something physical. "You shouldn't have to live like this," he said. Maya looked back up at him. "We know that," she replied. There was no anger in her voice, just truth. "But knowing doesn't change it." Ethan nodded once, because she was right. And for the first time in a long time, he didn't try to argue with that. Whilst a distant siren echoed somewhere far above them, fading quickly into the city noise, life moving on, unaffected. Ethan glanced at Lena again. Her face looked smaller somehow. Not physically, but like everything she had been carrying had slowly taken pieces of her with it. "How long have you been not eating?" he asked gently. Lena shook her head immediately. "I eat," she said quickly. But Maya spoke again. "She eats when we don't notice," she said. "Or she says she already ate at work." Ethan's jaw tightened. Another lie. Not malicious, not selfish, but necessary. Or at least, it had been. "Why didn't you tell me?" he asked, his voice quieter now, almost careful. Lena looked at him. Really looked at him. And for a moment, the fear faded, just enough to let something honest come through. "Because I didn't think it would matter," she said. The words were soft, but they hit harder than anything else she had said. Ethan felt it. Deep. Because there was no accusation in her voice, no anger, just a simple, painful truth. "I come in," she continued. "I do my job. I leave. That's how it works." She shifted the baby slightly, adjusting the coat around him. "You have your life," she said. "I have mine." Her eyes dropped. "I didn't think those two things were supposed to cross." Ethan looked around again, at the bridge, at the cardboard, at the careful, quiet system she had built to survive, and something inside him twisted. Because she wasn't wrong. That was exactly how it had worked. For 2 years. 2 years of her being in his home. And he had never once asked a single question that mattered. Not one. Maya stepped a little closer to her mother now, her hand reaching for Lena's arm. "You didn't see her," she said, looking back at Ethan. "Not really." The words weren't cruel. They were just true. And that made them worse. Ethan let out a slow breath. "No," he said quietly. "I didn't." The admission settled between them. Not defensive, not justified, just honest. Maya studied his face for a moment longer, as if she was deciding something. Then, "She still helped people," the girl said. Ethan blinked. "What?" Maya pointed toward the edge of the bridge where a small pile of neatly folded cloth sat beside a plastic bag. "That belongs to Mrs. Green," she said. "She sleeps near the bus stop." Ethan frowned slightly. "Your mom gives her food," Maya added, "and sometimes blankets." Lena shook her head slightly, as embarrassed. It's nothing, she murmured. But Maya didn't agree. She gives even when she doesn't have anything, the girl said. Ethan looked at Lena again, really looked, at her cracked hands, at the exhaustion in her eyes, at the way she held her child like it was the only thing keeping her standing. And something shifted again. Not just concern, not just guilt. Respect. Deep. Unavoidable. Because even here, at her lowest, she hadn't stopped being who she was. Why? Ethan asked softly. Lena hesitated. Then, because I know what it feels like, she said. Her voice was quiet, but steady. And I don't want anyone else to feel it if I can help it. Ethan didn't respond, because there was nothing to say. Nothing that wouldn't sound small compared to that. The wind moved again, colder this time. Maya pulled her arms closer to herself, but she didn't step back. Not yet. Ethan looked between them. The mother, the daughter, the baby wrapped in that coat. And for the first time, he understood the full picture. This wasn't just survival. This was sacrifice. Every single day. And suddenly, the question in his mind wasn't just what had happened. It was how no one had seen it. How he hadn't seen it. Because the signs had been there. They had to have been. And if he had been paying attention, if he had just looked, maybe this never would have happened. Ethan straightened slightly. We're leaving, he said. Both Lena and Maya froze. The words didn't make sense. Not here. Not like that. What? Lena asked, her voice barely above a whisper. You're not staying here tonight, Ethan said. Oh, or any night after this? Maya's eyes narrowed slightly. Careful, still cautious. Where would we go? She asked. Ethan met her gaze. Home, he said. The word hung in the air. Strange, unfamiliar, almost impossible. Because for them, that word had stopped meaning anything a long time ago. Lena shook her head slowly. I can't, she said. I can't just... Yes, you can, Ethan interrupted gently. You don't owe me anything for this. Her eyes filled again. It's not that, she whispered. It's just... She looked around, at the space she had built, the system she had created, the fragile stability she had managed to hold together. This is all we have right now. Ethan nodded once. I know, he said. Then he took a step closer. Not as an employer, not as someone above her, but as someone finally stepping into the truth. And that's exactly why it has to change. Maya watched him carefully. Every word, every movement. Still deciding, still weighing. Because trust wasn't given. Not anymore. It had to be earned. And right now, he was only at the beginning, the very beginning, of proving that he meant what he said. Ethan didn't move right away. Neither did Lena. Neither did Maya. For a long moment, the three of them stood beneath the bridge, suspended between two worlds, the one they had been living in and the one that had just been offered, and neither side felt real yet. A car roared overhead, the sound echoing down through the concrete like distant thunder. It snapped something loose in Ethan's mind. Not a decision. That had already been made. But a realization. Well, this wasn't the first time something had been wrong. It was just the first time he had stopped long enough to see it. And once he saw it, he couldn't unsee it. Images began replaying in his mind. Small things, quiet things things he had dismissed. 3 weeks ago, a Monday morning, sunlight spilling into the kitchen through the tall windows, reflecting off marble countertops so clean they almost didn't look real. Lena stood at the island, slicing bananas into perfect circles, placing them carefully on a plate. Sebastian liked bananas. Emily liked apples. Lena knew that. She always knew. Ethan had paused in the doorway that morning, his coffee still steaming in his hand, watching her work with that same quiet precision she always had. But something had been different. Her hands. They were red, cracked. Yet the skin along her knuckles split in thin lines that looked painful just to see. She had moved slower than usual, her fingers stiff as she set the plate down. Ethan had noticed, just for a second. Then his phone buzzed. An email, a meeting, a distraction. And the moment passed. He hadn't asked. Another memory surfaced. Late afternoon. The twins were napping upstairs. Lena stood at the stove, warming milk in a small pot. She stirred it gently, testing the temperature with a drop against her wrist before pouring it into a bottle. No one had asked her to do it that way. No one had taught her. But she remembered. Because she cared. Ethan had walked through the kitchen that day too, glancing briefly at the bottle, at the careful attention she gave something so small. He had thought, she's good at her job. And then he kept walking. He hadn't asked. Then there were the eyes, always tired. But lately, something else. The dark circles had deepened. Not just tired, worn. Like sleep wasn't something she had access to anymore. Like rest had become a luxury she couldn't afford. He had seen it. Every morning, every evening, and every time. He had chosen not to think about it, because thinking about it would mean asking, and asking would mean responsibility, and responsibility would mean stepping outside the clean lines of his life. Ethan exhaled slowly. Back under the bridge, the smell of damp concrete and stagnant water filled the air. Nothing here was clean. Nothing here was hidden. And that was the difference. 3 months, he said quietly, more to himself than anyone else. Lena shifted slightly, and her arms tightening around the baby. That's when everything changed, she said. Ethan looked at her. Before that, she continued, her voice distant now, like she was stepping back into a version of her life that felt like it belonged to someone else. We had a small apartment. Her eyes softened for just a moment. It wasn't much. 1 bedroom. The paint was peeling in the corners. The heater didn't always work. A faint smile touched her lips. But it was ours. Maya leaned against her now, her head resting lightly against Lena's arm. We had a table, the girl added quietly, and a real bed. Ethan listened, not interrupting. Because this mattered. We paid rent every month, Lena said. On time, every time. Her voice carried a quiet pride, the kind that came from holding things together when it wasn't easy. I worked. I saved what I could. I made sure the kids had what they needed. She looked down at the baby. He was born there. Ethan felt something tighten again. A home. A real one. Not perfect, but safe. Until it wasn't. What happened? He asked gently. Lena hesitated. Her eyes flickered just briefly, not with confusion, but with something else. Fear. Not the kind she had shown when he first appeared. This was different, deeper, more complicated. The rent went up, she said finally. Simple, clean, but something about it didn't sit right. And your pay? Ethan asked carefully. Lena nodded once. It changed around the same time. The words were measured, too measured, like she was walking a line she didn't want to cross. Ethan studied her. She wasn't lying, but she wasn't telling him everything either. Oh, not yet. Maya shifted slightly. Her fingers tightened around the edge of Lena's sleeve. "He's trying to help, Mama," she whispered. Lena closed her eyes briefly, just for a second, as if she was weighing something. Then she opened them again and looked at Ethan. Really looked at him, not as her employer, not as someone above her, but as a man standing in front of her, asking questions she had spent months avoiding. "I didn't want to risk it," she said quietly. "Risk what?" "My job." The words came out immediately, too fast, too certain. Ethan felt it again, that same feeling, something just beneath the surface, something she wasn't saying. Because whatever it was bigger than losing a job. It was something that had taught her silence was safer than truth. Ethan nodded slowly, not pushing, not yet, but because he could see it now, clearer than ever. She wasn't invisible because people didn't notice her. She was invisible because no one had chosen to look. There was a difference, a big one, and he had been part of it, a quiet part, but still a part. Another memory surfaced. Dinner. Vanessa laughing across the table, her voice light, effortless. The twins talking over each other about school. And Lena, moving quietly in the background, clearing plates, refilling glasses, always present, but never included. Ethan had sat there, comfortable, unquestioning, and Lena had existed in that space like she always had, necessary, but unseen. Back under the bridge, the reality of that hit him harder than anything else. Because this wasn't just about money. This wasn't just about a mistake. Well, this was about a system, a quiet one, a normal one, where someone like Lena could give everything and still disappear in plain sight. Ethan stepped closer. Not much, just enough to close the distance. "You shouldn't have had to go through this alone," he said. Lena let out a small, almost humorless breath. "You get used to it," she replied. Maya shook her head immediately. "No, you don't." Her voice was sharper now. "You just stop talking about it." Ethan looked at her, and for a moment, he saw it clearly. This wasn't just Lena's story. It was Maya's too. The child who had learned to be quiet, to observe, to protect, to carry things she never should have had to carry. And yet, she hadn't lost herself. Not completely. Because she was still standing here, still speaking, still refusing to stay silent, and even when it was easier to. Ethan glanced around one last time, at the bridge, at the cardboard, at the life built out of almost nothing, then back at them. "This ends tonight," he said. The words were quiet, but firm. Different now. Not just a promise, a decision. Lena didn't respond right away. Neither did Maya, because they had heard promises before. Empty ones, temporary ones. But something in Ethan's voice, something had changed. And even if they didn't trust it yet, they felt it. Just a little. Just enough to hesitate. Just enough to wonder. What if this time it was real? And that question, that small, fragile question, was more dangerous than anything else. Because hope, after everything, was the hardest thing to believe in and the easiest thing to break. Lena stood there, and her arms wrapped around her baby, her body still, but her mind moving in 100 directions at once. Hope wasn't new to her. It had visited before, quietly, briefly, and every time it had left. leaving something worse behind. So now, when Ethan said, "This ends tonight," she didn't move toward him. She didn't step away either. She stayed exactly where she was, balanced between believing and protecting herself from believing. Maya felt it too. Her grip on her mother's sleeve tightened slightly. She didn't speak. Not this time. Because something in the air had shifted. Subtly. But enough. Ethan noticed. He didn't rush them, didn't push. He had spent years moving through a world where decision happened fast, where problems were solved with calls and contracts and numbers. But this wasn't that world. Now, this was slower, fragile, and if he moved too fast, he would lose them. "I'm not asking you to trust me," he said quietly. Lena looked at him, then away, because trust wasn't something you could offer someone in a sentence. It was something that had to survive time. "I'm asking you to let me help," he added. The word help lingered. Simple, but heavy. Maya studied his face again. Longer this time, as if she was searching for something she couldn't quite name. Then, "Why?" she asked. The question caught him off guard. Not because he didn't expect it, but because he realized he didn't have a simple answer. He looked at Lena, at the baby, at the cardboard floor, and then back at Maya. "Because I should have seen this," he said. Honest. Not polished. Not perfect. And I didn't. Maya didn't react right away. But something in her expression softened. Just slightly. Not trust. Not yet. But less resistance. Lena shifted her weight. The baby stirred, letting out a soft sound, then settled again against her chest. "I don't want charity," she said quietly. Ethan nodded. "I know." "I want to work," she added. "I want to earn what we have." Her voice didn't shake, because that part of her, that dignity, had never broken. Not even here. "You already have," Ethan said. She looked at him, confused. "You've been earning it every day," he continued, "long before I realized what was happening." Silence followed, but it wasn't empty. It was filled with something new, recognition, the kind she had never received, and didn't quite know how to accept. Maya looked down briefly, then back up. "You don't even know everything," she said. Ethan's brow furrowed slightly. "What do you mean?" The girl hesitated, for the first time since he had met her. Not because she didn't want to speak, but because she was deciding how much to reveal. Then, "She helps other people too," Maya said. Lena shook her head immediately. "Maya!" But it was too late. The truth was already out. Ethan turned his head slightly. "Other people?" Maya nodded, pointing toward the edge of the bridge again. "There's an old lady near the bus stop," she said. "Mrs. Green." Ethan followed her gesture. He hadn't noticed it before. A small bundle of blankets, carefully folded, neatly stacked. "She can't walk very far," Maya continued. "So Mama brings her food." Ethan looked back at Lena. She avoided his eyes. "It's nothing," she said again, softer this time. But Maya wasn't finished. "And there's a man who sleeps behind the grocery store," she added. "He gets sick sometimes." Lena closed her eyes briefly. "He doesn't have anyone," Maya said. "So Mama checks on him." Ethan felt something shift again, deeper this time, because this didn't make sense. Not in the way he understood the world. She had nothing, and yet she gave. Not once, not occasionally, but consistently. like it was part of who she was. "Why would you do that?" he asked quietly. Lena opened her eyes, and for the first time since he had arrived, there was no fear in them, just something steady. "Because I know what it feels like to be invisible," she said. The words were simple, but they carried weight, the kind that didn't come from one moment, but from years. And if I can make someone feel seen," she added, "even for a little while." Her voice trailed off. She didn't finish the sentence. She didn't need to. Ethan understood, more than he wanted to, more than he expected to, because suddenly, this wasn't just about her surviving. It was about her refusing to let other people disappear the way she had, even when she was disappearing herself. Maya stepped closer to her mother again. "She says if you wait until you have enough to help people," the girl said, "you might never help anyone." Ethan let out a slow breath. Because that wasn't something you learned in comfort. That was something you learned in struggle, in loss, in places like this. He looked around again, really looked. And now, he saw it differently, not just as a place of hardship, but as a place where something extraordinary had been happening, quietly, unnoticed, unrewarded, every single day. And that made it worse, because it meant the world had been receiving her kindness without ever giving anything back. A drop of water fell from the bridge above, landing on the plastic sheet with a soft tap. Then another. The rhythm slow, steady, like time itself moving forward, whether they were ready or not. Ethan straightened slightly. "We're not staying here tonight," he said again. But this time, his voice carried something else. Not urgency, not pressure. Certainty. Lena hesitated. Her eyes moved across the space. The cardboard, the bucket, the small, careful system she had built to keep her children safe. It wasn't much, but it was theirs, in leaving it. Even for something better. Wasn't simple. Maya looked at her, then at Ethan, then back at her mother. "We can try," she said softly. The words were small, but they carried something powerful. Permission, not full trust. Not yet, but a step. Just one. Lena looked at her daughter, at the quiet strength in her face, at the courage it took to say that. After everything. Then she looked back at Ethan, and for a moment, something shifted. Not fear, not doubt. Something else. Something fragile, but real. "Okay," she said, barely above a whisper. "But enough." Ethan nodded once. He didn't smile, didn't celebrate. Because this wasn't a victory. Not yet. This was just the beginning of something that could still fall apart if he wasn't careful. He turned slightly, gesturing toward the road above. "I'll get the car," he said. Maya didn't move. "Wait," she said. Ethan paused. She walked toward the corner near the bridge wall. Kneeling down, she picked up a worn plastic bag, tied tightly at the top. She held it close to her chest, carefully, like it mattered, like it was important. Ethan noticed. "What's in there?" he asked. Maya looked at him, then at the bag, then back at him. "Proof," she said. The word landed quietly, but heavily. Ethan frowned slightly. "Proof of what?" Maya didn't answer right away. She just held the bag tighter, as if whatever was inside could change everything. And maybe It could. Because something in her eyes told him. This story wasn't over. Not even close, and whatever truth was still waiting, it was about to surface. Whether he was ready for it or not. Ethan stood still for a moment, his eyes fixed on the small plastic bag clutched in Maya's hands. Proof. The word echoed in his mind. Not assumption. Not suspicion. Proof. Something shifted deep inside him. Something colder now. Sharper. The kind of feeling that didn't come from confusion anymore, but from the quiet realization that the truth might be worse than he imagined. "Let me carry that," he said gently. Maya shook her head immediately. No. It wasn't rude. It wasn't defensive. It was instinct. Ethan didn't argue. He nodded once, accepting it. "Okay," he said. Because trust was still something he hadn't earned. Not fully. Lena adjusted the baby in her arms, pulling the coat tighter around him as a gust of wind slipped under the bridge. The night air was getting colder. "We should go," she said softly, but her voice carried urgency now. Not fear of Ethan, but fear of staying too long in a place she had already decided to leave behind, even if she wasn't ready. Ethan turned and walked toward the slope leading back up to the street. Gravel shifted under his shoes as he climbed, the sounds of the city growing louder with each step. Cars passing, distant music, voices carried on the wind. Normal life. So close. And yet, for Lena and her children, it had been completely out of reach. He reached his car and opened the passenger door, then paused. For a second, his hand rested on the handle, because this moment was bigger than it looked. This wasn't just giving someone a ride. It was crossing a line that had existed for years, between employer and employee, between comfort and survival, met between seeing and finally understanding. He opened the door fully and waited. Lena appeared a few seconds later, carefully making her way up the incline, one arm holding the baby, the other steadying herself. Maya followed close behind, still gripping the plastic bag tightly against her chest. Neither of them spoke. Neither of them rushed. Every step felt deliberate, measured, like they were walking into something unknown. Lena stopped a few feet from the car. Her eyes moved over it slowly. The polished surface, the clean interior, the soft leather seats. A different world. One she entered every day, but never like this. Never as someone who belonged inside it. "Go ahead," Ethan said quietly. Lena hesitated. Then, carefully, she stepped forward and sat down, keeping the baby close to her chest, as if afraid even now that something might be taken away. Maya stood beside the open door for a moment longer, watching, thinking. Then she climbed in too, still holding the bag. Ethan closed the door gently, then walked around to the driver's seat. The engine started with a quiet hum. Smooth, effortless. Nothing like the noise of buses or the distant rumble under the bridge. He pulled away from the curb. And just like that, they were leaving. The bridge disappeared behind them. Slowly at first, then completely. But none of them spoke. Not for several minutes. The city lights stretched out ahead, bright and clean, reflecting off glass buildings and storefront windows. Maya pressed her face slightly against the window, watching everything pass by. Not with excitement, not with wonder, but with a kind of quiet observation, like she was memorizing it, as if she needed to make sure it was real. Ethan glanced at her briefly, then back at the road. "Where have you been staying during the day?" he asked. Lena looked out the window. "At work," she said. "And before that?" She hesitated. Shelters. Sometimes, she replied. But they're not always safe. And they're not always open. Ethan nodded slowly. He didn't ask more, because he could hear it in her voice. There were parts of her story she wasn't ready to share. Not yet. And he wasn't going to force it. They drove in silence again until Maya spoke. My mom didn't always get paid like that, she said. Lena turned her head slightly. Maya. But the girl continued. Her voice wasn't loud, but it was steady. Before, she got more, Maya said. Enough for rent, food, everything. Ethan's grip on the steering wheel tightened slightly. He didn't look back. He kept his eyes on the road. How much? He asked. Maya answered without hesitation. 1,200. Ethan exhaled slowly. That was right. That was what he had approved. Every time. So what changed? He asked. There was a pause. A long one. Lena's hand moved slightly, her fingers brushing over the baby's back. A calming motion. For him or for herself. I was told, she began, her voice quieter now, that there were adjustments. What kind of adjustments? She didn't answer right away, because saying it would make it real. And once it was real, there would be no going back. Maya spoke instead. They said she would get 600 now, she said. And if she didn't agree, she could leave. Ethan felt something inside him harden. Cold. Precise. That's not what I approved, he said. Maya looked at him through the rearview mirror. I know, she said. The words were simple, but they carried something else. Certainty. Ethan frowned slightly. How do you know that? Maya looked down at the bag in her lap, then back up. My mom teaches me things, she said. She says you always need to know what you're supposed to get so nobody can take it from you. Ethan's chest tightened, because that meant Lena had known, at least partially, and still, she had stayed silent. Why didn't you come to me? He asked, glancing at Lena now. Her eyes stayed on the window. Because I was told not to, she said. The words came out carefully, measured, like she was stepping through something fragile. Who told you that? Silence. The kind that said everything without saying anything at all. Ethan's jaw tightened. He didn't push. Not yet. But the answer was already forming in his mind. The car turned onto a wider road. The lights brighter now. The buildings taller, cleaner. They were getting closer. Closer to his world. A world that suddenly felt unfamiliar. Because now, he could see what had been hidden inside it. Maya shifted slightly in her seat. Then slowly, she untied the plastic bag. Ethan noticed. His eyes flickered to the rearview mirror. What are you doing? He asked. She didn't answer. She just reached inside the bag and pulled something out. A folded piece of paper. Then another. Then another. She held them carefully. Not like trash. Not like something ordinary. But like something important. Not something that mattered. These are the receipts, she said. Ethan's heart rate picked up slightly. Receipts? Maya nodded. Every time my mom got paid, she said, she had to sign one. Ethan's grip on the wheel tightened again. And you kept them? My mom kept them, Maya corrected. I just carry them. She looked at the papers in her hands, then back at him. They all say 600. The words hit him harder than anything else. Because now, it wasn't just a story. It wasn't just a claim. It was evidence. Real. Documented. Repeated. Ethan felt something shift fully into place inside his mind. The confusion, the doubt, the uncertainty. Gone. Replaced by something else. Clarity, and underneath it, anger. Not loud, not explosive, but deep, controlled. The kind that didn't fade quickly, the kind that demanded answers. He pulled the car into a quiet street, slowing slightly. Not because he didn't know where he was going, but because his mind was already somewhere else. Back at the house, at the system, at the accounts, at the person who had access to all of it. Vanessa. The name settled heavily in his chest, and for the first time, he didn't push it away. Because now, there was no room left for doubt. He looked at Lena again, then at Maya, then back at the road. "Tomorrow morning," he said quietly. Maya leaned forward slightly. "What happens tomorrow morning?" she asked. Ethan's voice didn't rise, didn't change, but something inside it shifted. The truth comes out. Silence filled the car again. But it was different now. Not uncertain, not fragile. It was heavy. Waiting. Because whatever happened next was going to change everything, and none of them were going to be the same after it. The gates of the Beverly Hills mansion opened slowly, silently, as Ethan's car rolled up the curved driveway. Soft golden lights lined the path, illuminating trimmed hedges, polished stone, and a home that had always looked perfect from the outside. Tonight, it didn't. To Lena, it looked too clean, too quiet, too distant from the world she had just stepped out of. She held her baby tighter as the car came to a stop. Maya didn't move right away. Her eyes scanned everything: the tall windows, the manicured lawn, the absence of noise. It didn't feel safe. Not yet. Ethan stepped out first, walking around the car and opening the door for them. "Take your time," he said. Lena nodded slowly, then stepped out. When her feet touched the smooth driveway, and for a moment, she hesitated, because she had stood here before, many times, but always at a distance, always walking past, never as someone being invited in. Maya followed, still clutching the plastic bag tightly. Ethan led them toward the front door, not the side entrance, not the service door, the front. Lena noticed immediately. Her steps slowed. "Sir, I usually go around—" "Not tonight," Ethan said gently. He opened the door and stepped aside, letting them go first. Lena looked at the doorway, then at him, then back at the doorway again. This wasn't just an entrance. It was a line. One she had never crossed. Until now, she stepped forward, slowly, carefully, as if the moment might disappear if she moved too fast. Maya followed close behind, her eyes wide now, taking everything in: the marble floors, the tall ceilings, the quiet hum of a place that had never known struggle. The door closed behind them with a soft click. And just like that, they were inside. Ethan didn't speak right away. He gave them space, time, because he could feel it. The tension, the uncertainty, the disbelief. He walked toward the kitchen. "Sit down," he said. "I'll get something warm." Lena hesitated again, then slowly moved toward the edge of the room, sitting carefully on one of the chairs like she wasn't sure she was allowed to. Maya stayed standing for a moment longer, then sat beside her mother, still holding the bag. Ethan poured water into a glass, set it down in front of Lena, then another for Maya. Thank you, Lena whispered. Her voice sounded smaller here, like it didn't belong in a place this quiet. Ethan leaned against the counter, watching them. Not as an employer, not as someone observing from a distance, but as someone trying to understand something he had missed for far too long. The baby stirred. Lena gently adjusted the coat around him. That coat again. Even here. Even now. Ethan noticed, and something about it stayed with him. I'm going upstairs, he said after a moment. I need to check something. Lena looked up quickly, concern flickering in her eyes. You're not going to... No, Ethan said softly. You're safe here. She nodded, but the tension didn't fully leave her shoulders. Not yet. Because safety was still something unfamiliar. Ethan turned and walked toward the stairs. Each step felt heavier than the last, not physically, but mentally. Was because he already knew what he was about to find. He just needed to see it, with his own eyes. He entered his office, closed the door behind him, and for a moment, he just stood there. The room was quiet, controlled, everything in its place, just like his life had been, until tonight. He walked to his desk, sat down, opened his laptop. The screen lit up, casting a soft glow across the room. Familiar, routine. But tonight, nothing felt routine. He logged into the household accounts, scrolled through the records, numbers, dates, transactions. Everything looked normal at first, organized, clean, efficient, just like always. But now, he wasn't just looking, he was searching. He found Lena's payroll, $1,200, bi-weekly, consistent, approved, exactly what he remembered. His jaw tightened slightly. Well, because that wasn't what she had been receiving. He kept scrolling, deeper, into the detailed expense logs, the ones Vanessa managed, the ones he had never questioned, because he trusted her, because she handled things, because it was easier that way. Then, he saw it. A line item. Small, almost invisible. Personal adjustment. $600. Bi-weekly. Repeated. Over and over. Ethan's hand froze on the mouse. He clicked, opened the details. And there it was. The recipient. Vanessa Cole. The room felt colder. Not physically, but something inside him shifted. Hard. Final. He leaned back slightly, staring at the screen, running the numbers in his head. 3 months, 6 pay periods, $600 each time, $3,600. Taken. Quietly. Repeatedly. From a woman who had been sleeping under a bridge. Ethan closed his eyes. Just for a second. But that second felt long. Because everything connected now. The change. The silence. The fear. The eviction. It wasn't random. It wasn't bad luck. It was deliberate. He opened his eyes again. Looked at the screen. Then slowly closed the laptop. Because he didn't need to see it anymore. He already knew. The truth wasn't coming. It was already here. And it was worse than he had imagined. A soft sound came from downstairs. A chair moving. A quiet voice, a life continuing, unaware of what had just been uncovered. Ethan stood up, walked to the window, looked out over the city. Lights stretching endlessly into the distance. Beautiful. Distant. And now, complicit. Because everything he had built, everything he had trusted, had allowed this to happen, right under his roof. He exhaled slowly. and then turned and walked toward the door. Because this wasn't something that could wait. Not until morning. Not until later. Not until it was convenient. The truth had already surfaced, and now it was time to face it. Downstairs, Lena sat quietly, her hands resting on the baby, her eyes moving slowly across the room. Maya sat beside her, still holding the bag, still watching, still waiting. Because they both knew something was about to happen, something that would decide everything. Ethan reached the bottom of the stairs and stopped, just for a moment, looking at them, then toward the hallway leading to the master bedroom, where Vanessa was, unaware, unprepared, still living inside the version of reality that was about to collapse. Ethan's jaw tightened, not with anger, not loudly, but with something deeper, something final. He took a step forward, and this time, there was no hesitation, because whatever came next would change everything, not just for Lena, not just for Maya, but for him too. Because once you see the truth, you don't get to look away anymore. Ethan stopped halfway down the hallway. The master bedroom door stood closed at the end, soft light glowing beneath it. On any other night, that door meant comfort, familiarity, a life that made sense. Tonight, it felt like a boundary, a line between what he thought was real and what actually was. He didn't open it, not yet. Instead, he turned, slowly, and walked back toward the kitchen, because something inside him told him this wasn't where the truth needed to begin. Not with confrontation, not yet, but it needed to begin with understanding. He stepped into the kitchen again. Lena sat exactly where he had left her, her body still tense, her hands resting protectively on the baby. Her eyes lifted the moment he entered, searching his face for answers she wasn't sure she wanted. Maya didn't move. She was still holding the plastic bag, still watching him, waiting. Ethan pulled out a chair across from them and sat down. Not at the head of the table, not above them. Across. Equal. "I saw the accounts," he said quietly. Lena's breath caught. Maya leaned forward slightly. "And?" the girl asked. Ethan looked at her, then at Lena, then down at the table. "There are withdrawals," he said. $600. Every 2 weeks. Lena closed her eyes. Not in surprise, but in confirmation. Not like a truth she had already known, but had never been allowed to say out loud. Maya nodded slowly. "I told you," she said. Ethan looked back at her. "Yes," he said, "you did." Silence followed, heavy, but no longer uncertain. Now, it had direction. Ethan leaned forward slightly, resting his hands on the table. "I need to see those," he said gently, nodding toward the plastic bag. Maya didn't hand it over immediately. Her fingers tightened around it. Not out of defiance, but out of habit. Because for her, this wasn't just paper. It was protection. It was proof. It was the only thing that had stood between truth and silence. She looked at her mother. Lena hesitated, then slowly nodded. Maya took a breath and untied the bag. The plastic crinkled softly in the quiet kitchen. She reached inside, pulled out a stack of folded papers, carefully, one by one. She placed them on the table, not messy, not rushed, but with precision, deliberate. Like each piece mattered, because it did. Ethan watched, didn't interrupt, didn't rush her. Because this moment was bigger than the papers. It was trust, being offered, slowly, cautiously, but offered. Maya slid the first receipt toward him. "Start here," she said. Ethan picked it up. The paper felt thin, worn at the edges, folded too many times. He unfolded it carefully. His eyes scanned the writing. Date, amount, signature. $600. Lena Brooks. Signed. His jaw tightened slightly. He reached for the next one. Same format, same handwriting, same number. $600. Then the next, and the next, each one identical, each one confirming the same thing. Not a mistake, not a one-time error, a pattern, a system, intentional, repeated. Ethan placed the papers back down slowly, his movements controlled, measured, because inside, something was burning. Not chaotic, not explosive, but steady, focused. The kind of anger that didn't disappear, the kind that demanded action. "Did you ever question it?" he asked, looking at Lena. Her eyes dropped to the table. "Yes," she said quietly. "What happened?" She hesitated. Her fingers tightened slightly around the edge of the baby's blanket. "I was told it was temporary," she said. Ethan's eyes narrowed slightly. "And then?" Her voice grew softer. "I was told, if I complained, I could be replaced." Maya looked at him. "They said she was lucky to have a job at all," she added. Ethan exhaled slowly. The words felt familiar. Oh, too familiar. Because they belonged to a mindset he had seen before. He had just never realized it was living inside his own home. "And the accusations?" he asked carefully. Lena looked up, fear flickered again. "They said if I made trouble," she whispered, "they would tell you I was stealing." The room went still. Even the air seemed to pause. Ethan leaned back slightly in his chair. Not because he was relaxing, but because he needed space to process what he had just heard. This wasn't just about money anymore. This was control, fear, manipulation. And it had worked, because Lena had stayed. Silent, enduring, protecting her children the only way she knew how. Maya folded her hands together on the table. She didn't want to risk it, she said. Ethan nodded once. "I understand why," he replied. And he did, more than he wanted to, because the system had been designed exactly for that, to keep people quiet, to make them feel replaceable, invisible. And it had succeeded. Until now. Ethan reached for his phone, unlocked it, opened the camera. "I'm going to document these," he said. Maya watched him closely. Still cautious. Still measuring. He lifted one receipt. Took a photo. Then another. And another. Each image captured clearly. Each one saved. Backed up, impossible to ignore. He placed the phone down. Looked at Lena. "This is enough," he said. Her brow furrowed slightly. Enough for what? Ethan's voice didn't rise. Didn't harden. But something in it changed. "To stop this," he said. Maya leaned forward slightly. "And then what?" Ethan met her eyes, and for the first time, there was no hesitation in his answer. "Then we make it right." The words settled into the room, not as a promise, but as something closer to a decision. Lena looked at him, really looked, and something in her expression shifted. Not fully, not completely, but enough. Enough to let a small piece of belief in. Fragile, but real. The baby stirred again, let out a soft sound. Lena adjusted the coat around him automatically. That same coat, still there, even now. Ethan noticed again, and this time, he understood. It wasn't just warmth. It was protection. History, sacrifice. Everything she had given, everything she had endured, wrapped into one simple thing. He stood up slowly. "We'll handle this in the morning," he said. Maya frowned slightly. "Why not now?" Ethan glanced toward the hallway again, toward the closed door, then back at her. "Because tomorrow," he said, "there won't be anywhere for the truth to hide." Silence followed. But this time, it wasn't heavy. It wasn't uncertain. It was waiting. Building. Because something was coming. Something that would break everything open. And once it did, nothing would go back to the way it was. Not for him, not for Lena, not for anyone. Maya carefully gathered the receipts again, folded them, placed them back into the bag. But this time, she didn't tie it shut, because maybe, just maybe, she wouldn't need to carry it like that anymore. And for the first time that night, she didn't hold it as tightly, because the truth was no longer something they had to protect alone. Now, someone else had seen it, and that changed everything. Morning didn't arrive gently. It came sharp. Bright sunlight poured through the tall glass windows, spilling across marble floors and polished surfaces, illuminating every corner of a house that had always looked flawless. But today, the light didn't soften anything. It exposed. Lena woke first. Not because she had rested, but because her body wasn't used to stillness. She sat up slowly on the edge of the guest bed, her hands instinctively reaching for her baby. He was still there, sleeping peacefully, wrapped in that same coat. Safe, for the first time in months. And yet, her chest felt tight, because safety felt unfamiliar, temporary, like something that could disappear if she moved too quickly. She looked around the room, the soft blankets, the clean walls, the quiet. Now it didn't feel like hers. Not yet. Across the room, Maya was already awake, sitting upright, watching the door, alert, always alert. "You didn't sleep," Lena said softly. Maya shook her head. "I kept thinking," she replied. "About what?" Maya hesitated. "About what happens when people change their minds." Lena didn't answer, because she didn't have one. Downstairs, the house was already awake. Footsteps, cabinets opening, the faint sound of a coffee machine. Normal, routine, like nothing had happened, but everything had. Ethan stood in the kitchen, dressed, composed, but not calm. His phone rested on the counter beside him. Several messages already sent. His lawyer, his financial advisor, his assistant, the machine of his world. Already moving, because once he decided something, it didn't stay a thought. Once it became action. He didn't drink the coffee he poured. It sat untouched, cooling, because his attention wasn't there. It was focused, waiting. The sound of heels echoed down the hallway. Sharp, familiar. Vanessa. She entered the kitchen without hesitation, scrolling through her phone, her expression neutral, controlled, untouched. "How early are you up?" she said casually, not looking at him. "We have lunch at—" She stopped. Because she saw it. The tension, the silence, Ethan's stillness. Something wasn't right. "What?" she asked, finally looking up. Ethan didn't answer immediately, because this moment, he had imagined it, but now that it was here, it felt heavier than expected. "Sit down," he said. Vanessa blinked slightly. "What is this?" "Sit down." His tone didn't rise, but it didn't leave room for discussion. She hesitated, then slowly placed her phone on the counter and sat. Her eyes narrowed slightly, calculating. "What's going on?" Before Ethan could answer, another sound. Soft footsteps. Lena. She appeared at the edge of the kitchen, holding her baby. Maya walked beside her, still holding the plastic bag. Vanessa's expression changed instantly, sharp, displeased. "What are they doing here?" she asked, her voice tightening. Ethan didn't respond, not yet. Vanessa stood up immediately. "This is inappropriate," she said. "They shouldn't be in the house like this." Maya stepped forward. Before Lena could stop her, before Ethan could speak, she walked to the center of the kitchen, placed the plastic bag on the glass table, untied it, and began laying out the receipts, one by one, carefully, deliberately. The sound of paper against glass echoed in the room. Vanessa froze, just for a second. Then, "What is this?" she asked sharply. Maya didn't look at her. "These are my mom's pay receipts," she said. Ethan watched, silent, still, letting it unfold. Vanessa let out a short laugh, dismissive. "This is ridiculous," she said. "Ethan, what is this?" Maya placed the last receipt down, then looked up, directly at Vanessa. "They all say 600, she said. The room went quiet. Ethan reached for his phone, tapped the screen, and turned it toward Vanessa. Images of the receipts. Clear. Documented. Impossible to deny. Vanessa's smile faded. Not completely, but enough. "That's not," she began. "It is," Ethan said. His voice was calm, controlled, but final. But Vanessa's eyes flicked between him and the table, then back to him. "You don't understand how household adjustments work," she said quickly. "There were expenses, reallocations." "From her salary?" Ethan asked. The question cut cleanly through her explanation. Vanessa hesitated, just a fraction too long. "It was temporary," she said. "I was going to fix it." 3 months? Ethan replied. Silence. Vanessa straightened slightly, defensive now. "I manage this house," she said. "I make decisions all the time. You don't question them." Ethan nodded once. "You're right," he said, and for a moment, she thought she had regained control. Then, "That ends now." The words landed hard. Vanessa blinked. "What?" Ethan stepped closer. Not aggressively, but firmly. "You took money that didn't belong to you," he said. From someone who depends on it to survive." Vanessa's expression shifted again. Anger now. "Don't make this dramatic," she snapped. "It's $600. She still got paid." Maya's hands clenched slightly at her sides. Lena stood frozen, her body tense. Because this was the moment she had feared. The moment everything could collapse. "She was sleeping under a bridge," Ethan said. The room went still. Vanessa didn't respond, didn't deny it. Because she hadn't known. And that was worse. Ethan watched her carefully. "You didn't even ask," he said. Vanessa's jaw tightened. That's not my responsibility. The words hung in the air, cold, sharp, final. Maya looked down for a second, then back up. And something in her expression changed. Not fear, not hesitation, something stronger. My mom is not a thief, she said. Vanessa turned toward her. I never said she was. But you said you would, Maya replied. Silence, heavy, unavoidable. Ethan didn't move, didn't speak, because he didn't need to. The truth was already standing in the room, clear, undeniable. Vanessa looked at him again, searching, calculating, trying to find a way out. But there wasn't one. Not this time. Ethan picked up his phone, pressed a button. My lawyer will be here in an hour, he said. Vanessa's eyes widened slightly. You're overreacting. No, Ethan said quietly. I'm correcting something that should have never happened. He looked at her, really looked, and for the first time, there was distance. Clear, irreversible. You need to pack your things, he added. The words landed like a final line. Vanessa stared at him. You're serious? Ethan didn't answer, because he didn't need to. The answer was already there, in everything, in the silence, in the space between them. Vanessa looked around the room, at the house, at the life she had built, then back at him, and for the first time, she realized this wasn't a discussion. This wasn't temporary. This was over. She turned, without another word, and walked out, her heels echoing down the hallway. Then, silence. Deep, heavy, but different. Not tense, not uncertain. Resolved. Ethan exhaled slowly, then turned and looked at Lena, at Maya, at the baby still wrapped in that coat. And for the first time, there was no distance, no barrier, just understanding. And something else, something that hadn't been there before. Respect, the kind that couldn't be undone and wouldn't be forgotten, because this time he had seen, and he wasn't going to look away again. The house felt different after Vanessa left. Not quieter, not lighter, but clearer. Like something that had been sitting in the air for a long time had finally been spoken out loud. Lena stood where she was, still holding the baby, her body stiff, her eyes uncertain. Maya didn't move either, because even though the confrontation was over, they didn't know what came next, and that part was just as important. Ethan walked slowly back toward the table. The receipts were still there, spread out, undeniable. He gathered them carefully, stacked them, and handed them back to Maya. These belong to you, he said. Maya hesitated, then took them. But this time, her grip wasn't as tight, because now, they weren't her only protection. Ethan turned to Lena. Come with me, he said gently. She blinked. Where? Upstairs. The word alone made her pause, because upstairs was never her place. Not in this house, not in this life. She shifted slightly. I can stay down here, she said quickly. I don't want to. You're not staying down here, Ethan said. Not harsh, not forceful, but certain. Lena looked at him, searching his face, trying to understand what had changed. Because something had. Something real. And she didn't know how to stand inside it yet. Maya stepped closer to her. It's okay, she whispered. Lena looked down at her daughter, at the quiet confidence in her voice, and slowly, she nodded. Ethan led them upstairs, each step echoing softly, measured, different now. And because this time, they weren't invisible. They reached the hallway. Doors lined both sides, closed, private. Lena slowed again. Instinct, habit. This room, Ethan said, opening a door. Inside, a guest room, soft light, clean sheets, a bed that looked untouched, ready, waiting. Lena stood in the doorway, didn't step in right away, because she had spent months sleeping on cardboard, and now, this felt unreal. You can stay here, Ethan said, as long as you need. Her eyes filled slightly, not with relief, not fully. Because part of her still didn't trust it, didn't trust, thus, that it would last. But another part, a small one, wanted to believe. Thank you, she said quietly. Maya walked in first, her small hand brushing against the bed, testing it. Then she sat down. The mattress sank slightly under her weight. She looked up. A flicker of something crossed her face. Not a smile, but close. Lena followed, still holding the baby, still moving carefully, as if the room might disappear if she wasn't gentle. Ethan stepped back. I'll give you some time, he said. He paused at the door, then added, and Lena? She looked up. You don't have to come through the back door anymore. The words hung there, simple, but heavy. Because they weren't just about a door. They were about everything. Lena swallowed, nodded once. Ethan closed the door softly and stood in the hallway. Alone. For a moment. He leaned against the wall, let out a slow breath, because everything had moved so fast. And yet, it felt like something that had been building for years. He straightened and walked back downstairs. The house was quiet again, but different. The silence wasn't empty anymore. It was settled. Ethan returned to the kitchen, picked up his phone, checked the time, then made another call. Yes, he said. I want everything reviewed. Full audit. He paused. No delays. Another pause. And start the transfer process. He ended the call, set the phone down. Because this wasn't just about stopping what had happened. It was about rebuilding what should have been there in the first place. Upstairs, Lena sat on the edge of the bed, still holding the baby. Maya lay back against the pillows, looking at the ceiling. This feels weird, she said. Lena nodded. Yes. Too quiet, Maya added. Lena glanced around. The room was still. No wind, no dripping water, no distant noise from traffic above. Just silence. Safe, but unfamiliar. You can sleep, Lena said softly. Maya shook her head. I don't know how. Lena's eyes softened, because she understood. More than anyone. She adjusted the coat around the baby. Even here. Even now. She couldn't stop. Because it wasn't just about warmth. It was habit. Memory. Protection. Maya noticed. You can take it off, she said. Lena looked down at the coat. Her fingers paused. Then slowly, she shook her head. Not yet. Maya didn't ask why, because she already knew some things stayed, even when everything else changed. Downstairs, Ethan stood by the window, looking out. The city stretched out before him, bright, endless, and now, different. because he had seen something he couldn't unsee. And once that happened, there was no going back. Not to the way things were. Not to the version of himself that had walked past the signs, that had chosen not to ask, not to look. He closed his eyes briefly, then opened them again. Clear, focused, because the choice had already been made. And this time, he was going to follow through. No matter what it changed, no matter what it cost. Because some things, once you see them, demand more than just understanding. They demand action, and he was ready, finally ready, to do what he should have done. A long time ago, time didn't change everything overnight, but it began to, slowly, quietly, like light returning to a room that had been dark for too long. 3 months later, the city felt different, not because it had changed, but because Lena had. Well, the small house sat on a quiet street in a modest neighborhood just outside the heart of the city. Nothing extravagant, no towering gates, no marble floors. But it was clean, warm, and most importantly, it was theirs. The front door was painted a soft shade of blue. Maya had picked the color. She said blue feels like breathing, Lena had explained once. Ethan remembered that. He noticed everything now, because he had learned. The small things were never just small things. Inside, the house carried a different kind of silence. Not the heavy, uncertain quiet of survival, but a calm one. The kind that allowed people to rest. Really rest. Lena stood in the kitchen, sunlight spilling across the wooden counter as she poured cereal into 2 bowls. Her hands were still marked, still healing, but they didn't shake anymore. Maya sat at the table, her school backpack resting against the chair, books neatly stacked inside. She wore a clean uniform, not new, but cared for, and her posture had changed, not guarded, not tense, just steady. The baby, now a little bigger, sat in a high chair nearby, tapping his hands softly against the tray, making quiet sounds that filled the room with something that hadn't been there before. Ease. Lena turned slightly, watching them both, and for a moment, she just stood there, taking it in. Because even now, it didn't feel completely real, not all the way. Ethan knocked lightly before stepping inside. He didn't use a key, never had, even though he could. He waited, every time. Respect. Lena looked up. A small smile touched her face. "Good morning," she said. "Morning," Ethan replied. He stepped in, closing the door behind him. His presence didn't feel like authority anymore. It felt familiar. Maya glanced up from the table. "You're early," she said. Ethan smiled slightly. "You're ready early." She shrugged. "I don't like being late." He nodded. Of course she didn't. Some habits didn't fade easily. But now, they came from a different place, not fear, not survival, just discipline. He leaned slightly against the doorway. "School's going well?" he asked. Maya nodded. "I'm ahead in math." Ethan raised an eyebrow. "Already?" She gave a small, almost proud smile. "I like it." Lena watched them quietly, still not used to this, not fully, because for so long, her world had been separate, divided. Now, it overlapped, in ways she was still learning to understand. Ethan turned to her. "How are you feeling?" he asked. The question was simple, but it meant more now. Because he didn't ask it out of obligation. He asked because he wanted to know. Lena paused, then answered honestly. "Better," she said. And she meant it. Not perfect, not completely free of fear, but better. And that mattered. A lot. Ethan nodded. That's good. He didn't push, didn't overstep, because he had learned. Healing wasn't something you rushed. It was something you allowed. Maya stood up, grabbing her backpack. I'm ready, she said. Lena walked over, adjusting the strap gently. You have lunch? She asked. Maya nodded. In the bag. Lena smiled faintly. Some things. She would never stop checking. Ethan opened the door for her. I'll drive you, he said. Maya hesitated, just for a second, then nodded. Okay. She stepped outside. The morning air was cool, fresh, different. Ethan followed, then paused, looking back. Lena stood in the doorway, the baby on her hip, the house behind her, and for the first time, she looked like someone who belonged where she stood, not someone passing through, not someone surviving, someone living. Ethan gave a small nod, then turned and walked with Maya to the car. The ride was quiet, but comfortable, not tense, not uncertain, just easy. You still have the bag? Ethan asked after a moment. Maya looked out the window. Yeah. Do you still need it? She didn't answer right away, then. No, she said softly. But she didn't throw it away either. Because some things you didn't let go of, not completely, not when they had protected you, or not when they had carried your truth. Ethan nodded. He understood. When they reached the school, Maya opened the door, then paused. Thank you, she said. Ethan looked at her. For what? She thought about it. Then, for seeing us. The words were simple, but they stayed. Ethan nodded once. You were always there, he said. I just had to learn how to look. Maya gave a small smile, then stepped out. Walking toward the school, not rushing, not looking back, just moving forward. Ethan watched her go, then drove away, back toward a life that no longer looked the same, because it wasn't. And neither was he. Back at the house, Lena stood in the baby's room. A small wooden crib sat near the window. Soft light filled the space by my kissing. The baby slept peacefully inside, breathing slow, steady, safe. But Lena reached for something beside the crib. The coat. The same one. Worn, faded, still carrying the weight of everything it had been through. She held it for a moment, her fingers tracing the fabric. Then, she placed it gently over the baby, not because he needed it. The room was warm, the blankets were enough. But because some things weren't just about need. They were about memory, about survival, about never forgetting what it took to get here. Lena stepped back, watching, her eyes soft, but strong, because she had made it through something that had almost broken her, and she had done it, without losing who she was. That part, no one had taken from her, and no one ever would. Outside, the wind moved softly through the trees. The world kept turning, as it always did. But for Lena, for Maya, for Ethan, everything had changed, not in a single moment, but in a series of choices, to see, to act, to care, and to stay, even when it would have been easier not to. The nights were the hardest, not because they were cold anymore, not because of hunger, not because of fear, but because they were quiet. And in that quiet, Memories had space. Lena stood by the window, looking out into the soft glow of streetlights stretching down the quiet neighborhood road. The house was still, peaceful in a way she was still learning to trust. Behind her, the baby slept in his crib, his breathing steady, soft, wrapped in warmth, and still. The coat rested over him. That same coat, worn, faded, but carefully placed, like it had always been. Lena turned slowly, her eyes resting on it. For a moment, but she didn't move, because that coat was more than fabric. It was every night she stayed awake while her children slept. Every morning she stood up when her body told her not to. Every silent sacrifice no one had seen, and every moment she chose to keep going, even when it would have been easier not to. A soft knock came from the door. Lena turned. Ethan stood there. He didn't step inside right away. He never did. "Can I?" he asked quietly. Lena nodded. He walked in slowly. His eyes moved to the crib, then to the coat. He paused, because even now, it stayed. "You still use it," he said gently. Lena gave a small smile. "Not because he needs it," she said. Ethan nodded. "I figured." She walked closer to the crib, her fingers brushing lightly over the fabric. "I kept thinking I would stop," she said. "That once we were safe, once everything changed, I wouldn't need it anymore." She paused, then shook her head slightly. "But I do." Ethan leaned lightly against the wall, listening. "Because this mattered." "It reminds me," Lena continued, her voice soft but steady, "of what it took to get here." Her eyes didn't leave the coat. "Of what we survived." Silence settled in the room. Not heavy, not painful, just honest. Ethan looked at her, and for the first time, he didn't see her as someone he had helped. He saw her as someone who had endured something he could never fully understand, and still had chosen kindness. "That hasn't changed," he said. Lena looked at him. "Huh? What hasn't?" "You," Ethan replied. The word hung there, simple, but full, because it was true. Even under the bridge, even with nothing. Well, she had still been the same person, the one who gave, who cared, who refused to let the world make her smaller than she was. Lena let out a quiet breath. "I didn't do anything special," she said. Ethan shook his head. "That's where you're wrong." She frowned slightly. "You gave when you had nothing," he said. "Most people don't do that when they have everything." The words settled between them. Lena didn't respond right away, because part of her still didn't know how to accept that, how to see herself the way he did. But something inside her shifted. Just a little. Outside, a car passed slowly down the street, its headlights moving softly across the walls. The world continued, unaware, as it always did. Maya appeared at the doorway. She stood there quietly, listening, then stepped in. "You're still talking about the coat?" she asked. Lena smiled faintly. "Always." Maya walked closer, looked at her little brother, then at the coat. Her expression softened. "It's not just the coat," she said. Ethan looked at her. "What do you mean?" Maya crossed her arms lightly. "It's everything," she said. Lena raised an eyebrow. Maya shrugged slightly. "The bridge," she added, "the cold nights, the way we had to share everything." She paused. "But also, how we stayed together." Her voice didn't shake, because she wasn't afraid of it anymore. Not the memory, not the past, because it didn't own her, not anymore. Ethan nodded slowly. Because she was right. That was the part that mattered. Not just what they went through, but who they stayed while they went through it. Lena looked at her daughter, and something in her chest softened. A deep, quiet kind of pride, the kind that didn't need words. You don't have to carry it anymore, Ethan said gently. Maya looked at him. The bag, he added. She tilted her head slightly, thinking. Then, I know, she said, but she didn't say she would throw it away. Because like the coat, it wasn't just something you got rid of, it was something you grew past, at your own pace. Ethan stepped back slightly, giving them space again, because he had learned not everything needed to be fixed. Some things just needed to be understood. I should go, he said. Lena nodded. Thank you, she said. Not for the house, not for the help, but for something deeper, for seeing, for staying, for choosing not to look away. Ethan paused at the door, then looked back, at Lena, at Maya, the baby sleeping under that coat, and for a moment, he understood something clearly. Kindness doesn't always come from having more. Sometimes. It comes from having less, and still choosing to give. He gave a small nod, then left. The door closed softly behind him. Lena turned back to the crib, her hand resting gently on the edge. Maya stood beside her, the room quiet again, but no longer heavy, no longer uncertain, just peaceful. And for the first time, that peace didn't feel temporary. It felt earned, real, something that wouldn't disappear overnight. Lena adjusted the coat slightly, careful, gentle, then stepped back. The three of them stood there, watching, breathing, living, not surviving anymore, living. And somewhere, deep inside that moment, was a truth that didn't need to be spoken out loud. And some people survive in silence, giving everything, asking for nothing. Until one day, someone finally chooses to see them. And when that happens, it doesn't just change their life, it changes everything. Because being seen is where everything begins. And sometimes, that's all it takes to change a life. If this story meant something to you, don't just scroll past it. Take 1 second and leave a simple comment. You can type 1 if you believe kindness still matters, or type 0 if you've ever felt invisible like Lena. No long message needed, just something small, so this story can reach someone else who needs it. And if you want more stories like this, real, emotional, and powerful, make sure you subscribe to the channel, because the next story might be the one that stays with you.